Let's talk about line plots with fractional data. Take a look at our first problem. Students in Miss Jones's class measured their pinky fingers in inches. Make a line plot showing the data. In our data table, we have the measurements of pinky fingers in inches. On our line plot below, we will put an X each time the measurement is listed in the data table. First, we have 1 3/4. So we'll put an X above 1 3/4. Next, we see 2. So we'll put an X above 2. 2 1/4. 2 1/2. 2 3/4. 3. Then we have 2 1/2. 2 3/4, 1 3/4, 3, 2 1/4, and 2 1/2. Each of our X's represents a measurement of one of the students. Now let's look at the line plot we just made and answer some questions. How many students measured their pinky finger? If each X represents one of the students' measurements, we can count the number of X's to determine the answer. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So a total of 12 students measured their pinky finger. The next question says, how many students measured 2 1/4 or 2 1/2? So first let's look at 2 1/4. We can see 2 X's above 2 1/4. That means 2 students had that measure. Now let's look at 2 1/2. We see 3 X's above 2 1/2. So that tells us that 3 students had that measure. Now let's add those together. That's a total of 5 students that measured 2 1/4 or 2 1/2. Here's another problem. Many people in New York take the subway to work. Below is a table showing how much time individuals spend each day traveling to work on the subway. Make a line plot of the data. So our table tells us the time spent on the subway in fractions of an hour. Let's put an X each time the fraction of the hour is recorded. So we'll start with 1/4 and put 1 X over 1/4. Next, we'll look at 3/4, 1/2, another report of 1/2, and again 1/2, 1, 3/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1 1/4, 3/4, 1/4, and 1 1/2. Let's look at the line plot we just created and answer some questions. How many people rode the subway for 1/4 of an hour? So we'll look at our measurement, 1/4 of an hour, and count the number of X's above. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that rode the subway for 1/4 of an hour. The next question says, what is the most amount of time a person spent on the subway? I can see from my line plot that 1 1/2 hours is the most amount of time a person spent on the subway. Only one person spent that amount of time. Let's look at another problem. A dentist measured the smiles of some of his patients in inches. Below is a table showing the results. Make a line plot of the data. So the measurements of smiles in inches are listed. Let's put an X above each measurement on our line plot. We'll start with 2 inches, then 1.5. We'll continue with another 1.5, and again 1.5, 1.5, 2, 3/4, 1 1/4, 2 1/4, 1 1/4, and 2 1/4. Let's use our line plot to answer some questions. What measure in inches was the most common? I can easily see that 1.5 inches was measured the most. So this measurement was the most common with 4 people with that measure. The next question says, how many total patients were measured? Each X represents a patient's measurements, so I'll count the number of X's. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 total patients were measured. And this concludes our lesson on line plots with fractional data.